following program on Ada Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations.
Tonight, we discuss the groundwork being laid for the formation of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Sri Lanka. What progress has been made in the introduction of legislature surrounding the commission, and what does the establishment of such a commission mean for the future of human rights in Sri Lanka? A very good evening, and thank you for joining us on yet another episode of Law, Land and Liberty, where we break down key legal concepts for the layman that's occurring in current time. Now, tonight's topic is something that's actually very current and it's developing as we speak. The progressions are underway, and that's on the establishment of a commission for truth and reconciliation in Sri Lanka. Now, this topic has been discussed over the years, of course, following various human rights issues that have popped up in the country. But really, where is it heading? Where's the physical progress, and what exactly has been achieved so far through the formation of such a commission? Has it been a proper progress, or do we see some sort of delays? Will we be able to see a commission form this year, next year? How is it going on? Well, there's a lot for us to discuss on this specific topic, and it's a very exciting topic as well. And to speak on it, we have, I believe, the best individual for this program, and that is President's Counsel, Asanga Gunawansa. Doctor, thank you very much for coming on to the program. It's not your first time on the program as well. Really excited to have you here. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Of course. Just a small introduction on Dr. Gunawansa. He has over 30 years of experience as a lawyer, and he's the head of the Colombo Law Alliance as well. But more importantly, he is the Director General for the Interim Secretariat for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission here in Sri Lanka. Safe to say we're in the best hands when it comes to the explanation of the progress of the Commission at the moment. Well, before we go into the program, here's a bit of a breakdown, a very general outline of how exactly we're going to approach this topic. First, we're going to talk about the foundations of the Commission. How exactly has it been going on so far? Next, we'll be talking about the legislative specifics, about the bill that's about to be coming in place and what the Interim Secretariat is doing in that regard. And finally, we'll be talking about the future of truth and reconciliation in Sri Lanka.
Hello, my name is Malita Pereira and I am an engineering student. My question is on the foundation of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Sri Lanka. What steps have been made so far in bringing the commission to fruition?
All right, well, without any further ado, let's get right into this extremely packed topic. We don't have much time as well, considering the vast expanse of developments that have been done in this field in such a short time as well, Doctor. Well, why don't you start us off right at the very basics, at the very beginning, Doctor. Now, currently, you're the Director General for the Interim Secretariat for Truth and Reconciliation. The Commission has not been established as of yet. So could you please explain to us the basics of what exactly the Commission is going to entail and what areas are going to be covered specifically under the Commission?
Yes, I can provide an explanation. I think it's also important to provide a little bit of the backdrop. So the idea of establishing a system for transitional justice in Sri Lanka came about around 2016, because back in the day the government took the initiative to invite a committee of experts to undertake some research and do a study as to the legislation that should be introduced in Sri Lanka to deal with the issue of transitional justice, because as you know, we had almost a 30-year conflict which ended, around 2009, and some quarters of our people might say that, if the aftermath of the conflict ending in 2009, still there are grievances and things that have occurred, which need to be addressed. So it is in this backdrop that around 2016, this committee of experts was put together. And after doing detailed research, their proposal at that time was to introduce 4 different legislations to deal with the subject of transitional justice. And this followed during the period 2016 to 2018, actual drafting being done of these laws. And these drafts were also prepared on the, or rather based on extensive public consultation that was held by a task force that was put together during that time called Consultation Task Force. So the result of this exercise was around 2018. In 2018, two of the laws were passed, and one was to establish the Office of Missing Persons, and the other one was to establish Office of Reparations. The third law that was prepared but not passed at that time was a law to establish ONUR, Office of National Unity and Reconciliation, which was very recently passed by Parliament in January this year. So, as I said earlier, there were 4 legislations which were proposed. The fourth one was to establish a Truth Commission, which unfortunately, although the initial draft was prepared during the period 2016 to 2018, was thereafter not taken forward. When the current president assumed office, according to the information that I have, maybe around October 2022, a cabinet subcommittee had been appointed to make recommendations with regard to the way forward in taking the necessary steps for establishing a Truth Commission. The recommendation of that commission had been to appoint an independent commission by an Act of Parliament. Thereafter, a cabinet decision had been taken around January 2023 to work on a legislation to establish an independent commission by an Act of Parliament. Then around May 2023, another cabinet decision was taken pursuant to a cabinet memorandum being submitted by the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Honourable Minister of Justice, that was a joint submission, to establish an interim secretariat to do the foundation work in order to develop the law and to lay the foundation for the commission to start work when it is eventually established. This was followed by an invitation extended to me around July 2023 to head the interim secretariat, which I am doing on pro bono basis. Now we have an interim secretariat and we have about 12 staff members there, and we have several divisions. We have a legal division, we have a policy division, we have a public relations division, and an IT division. So what the interim secretariat has done with pursuant to my team coming together around October 2023 is to take a look at that old legislation that was in draft form prepared during the period 2016 to 2018, and we compare that with laws passed in other jurisdictions to deal with transitional justice. So there have been approximately about 26 truth commissions around the world during different times. We went through all those and selected about 12 to do a case study. Then we looked at the legislations in those countries and thought, what are the good principles we can bring in from there, because the problems in each country is different. So as a result of that, we can't mirror a law that is in another jurisdiction and apply it, completely in Sri Lankan context, because as I said, the problems and the way to deal with the problem may be different. But there are certain technical lessons to learn from, how to apply the law and, how to draft certain provisions and so on. So with that information and knowledge that we gathered from this research, we proposed certain refinements to that old law and developed this as a concept paper. Then pursuant to a proposal being made to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Justice, a committee of about 5 to 6 members was appointed as a smaller drafting committee to look at these proposals and tweak the language. So pursuant to that exercise, we had a concept paper now which could be taken for public consultation or taken to the public for the purpose of carrying public consultations. I'll come to that a little later as to why that process is very important. And then around December 2023, if I'm not mistaken, in order to bring this concept paper to public domain, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs has gazetted it. Now, just because it is gazetted, a lot of people think that, now we have started the legislative process and the next thing is it will be tabled in Parliament. But as far as I'm aware, the instructions that have been, or advice that have been given to us, is to continue with public consultations to see how this draft law, as I would like to call it a concept paper still, could be further refined so that it has public acceptance and we build public consensus, and it can comprehensively deal with the conflict that we had, especially in the north and the eastern provinces from 83 to 2009. There are root causes going beyond that, and there are repercussions of this problem which are felt even today, and how to deal with that in a comprehensive manner. So that's what the Interim Secretariat is doing. In addition to that, I mentioned earlier about the study that the Interim Secretariat has undertaken on 12 jurisdictions. So based on that, we are also in the process of preparing a way forward guidance document for the commissioners when they are eventually appointed. It's like a lessons learned report, so that in certain scenarios, what steps did a particular commission in a particular jurisdiction take? And if in the Sri Lankan context, if it is relevant, could Sri Lanka follow that or do something slightly different, or is there something to learn from that? So it's important to have that background information, because once the commissioners are appointed, and they might need some sort of jurisprudence or some guidance as to how they should implement their powers. So we are preparing that report in order to provide that guide to the commissioners when they are eventually appointed. So that's where we are at the moment. The draft law, which I call a concept paper, is available in all 3 languages at the moment. So we are in the process of carrying out several public consultations. We have consulted with the relevant stakeholders in the northern province, the eastern province. In Colombo, we have had several rounds of discussions. In fact, day before yesterday and on Monday, we had 2 consultations. We have also invited input from the armed forces. We have written to all 3 service commanders and the police, and we are also planning to meet the Mahanayakas, in the coming weeks, and also other religious leaders, during the course of this month and the next month. And eventually, what we are planning to do is, with all this input that we, get through these public consultations, to do another review of the draft law or the concept paper and see whether it could be further refined before it is eventually placed before Parliament.
Right. So there is quite a bit that has already been done. But Doctor, in your opinion, when it comes to the completion or the progression of all of these activities that have been undertaken by the Interim Secretariat, just as a percentage, how much do you believe has already been laid as groundwork? Do you believe there's a lot more for us to look forward to when it comes to the procedural aspects, or are we almost there?
Let me put it this way. So if you look at the draft concept paper from a very technical perspective, even now, I would say it's pretty sound. Because as I said, it has been enriched by the lessons we learned following a detailed study of laws passed in other jurisdictions. So as a technical document, it's very good. But having said that, if you ask 10 different people in Sri Lanka, how do we deal with the conflict, their perception, their expectations may be different. So we have to do a lot of consensus building. And eventually, although we draft a law, the law will have to be presented to Parliament, and the other legislative body need to pass it. So we also need to develop political consensus. So that is where we have a perhaps uphill task, and which is what we are trying to do. But the law itself is pretty sound. But that said, there may be certain amendments that may be required. I mean, I'm sure, even the people who initially drafted it and people who subsequently reviewed it, including me, may have missed something. We are all bound to make human errors, and there may be other experts, other even ordinary people reading it might pick on something and make a very useful suggestion. So that is why this consultation process is extremely important, to make sure that we address all those concerns and tweak the language and develop the law as much as possible to eventually find a lasting solution and to ensure that there is no recurrence of the problem that we had. Having said that, I must also say that it's very difficult in any country to draft a law in order to ensure that 100% of the people are satisfied. That would be impossible. So there will always be criticism, but constructive criticism is most welcome. And I firmly believe that pursuant to the exercise that we are doing at the moment, we should be in a position to have a very well drafted law.
Right. Of course, that means things are looking up. It's pretty hopeful. Before we go in for a break, Doctor, I'd like to ask you now, with the multiple meetings that have been held with relevant stakeholders, do you see the discussions going in a progressive manner? Has there been a lot of negative pushback? Because it's a very charged topic as well, considering the history of our country. So it might be a little bit harder to actually make progress on finding middle ground. How exactly have the talks been going on?
The talks have been very constructive. I mean, let me say this, every person to whom we have spoke to understand and agree that reconciliation is necessary. And everyone also agrees that non-recurrence is also important. So that is common ground. Now, the issues we have is, has there been a delay in dealing with it? Yes, there has been a delay. If we say that the war ended in 2009 or the conflict ended in 2009, now we are in 2023, have effective steps been taken? I mean, certain initiatives have been taken. The government of Sri Lanka in the past have appointed various commissions of inquiry. The Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, or LLRC, is one good example. That has made some really good recommendations, but perhaps implementation of those recommendations may not have happened due to various reasons. So as a result of that, I can understand certain people may be frustrated, especially if you are a grieved person due to the conflict. You may not have got effective solution and you are still waiting for it. So when they question, or when they rather highlight the delay, my answer is that yes, there has been a delay, but if we can find a solution even now, isn't it better than complaining about the delay? So people do come around, but then the expectations may be different. Now, for example, when we spoke to certain people in the north and the east, some of them say that, okay, we need to move on, this is water under the bridge, there is no point focusing on what happened in the past, we have to focus almost entirely on non-recurrence and dealing with current problems. But on the other hand, for justifiable reasons, some people feel that no, I mean, we are victims of certain incidents, and therefore we need to find solutions, and if there are perpetrators, then legal action should be taken. Now, it's very important for us to understand when we talk about victims, because I have seen in the media sometimes there are several misinterpretations about the exercise what we are doing at the moment. For example, I read somewhere saying that this is a law that is being drafted to punish the war heroes. I mean, there's absolutely no truth in that, because we acknowledge the fact that, I mean, the government, everybody, even people in the north, people in the south, everybody acknowledges the fact that there has been a conflict, and as a result of the conflict, there are victims on both sides of the fences. Now, even during when my team went and met the people in the north and these, I highlighted, look, there have been incidents. The Aranthalawa incident was one that I highlighted, where innocent Buddhist priests were massacred. Then I highlighted the fact that when certain, police and armed personnel surrendered, how they were inhumanely, killed. And in one incident, I remember there were, online, there were posters put up saying that this is a human carpet and, things like that. So horrendous things. So likewise, there are complaints from the other side of the fence also. And say, for example, one complaint that we received was during our discussions, the military personnel came to our village and certain youth were taken and only few of them returned. What happened to the others? But when we ask, okay, who actually came, can you identify? It's difficult to identify, they don't know. So during this period, not only military personnel, there were paramilitary forces which were operating. So finding the perpetrators to that extent will be a difficult task. I'm not saying that it should not be done, but there is provision in the law to do that. But what is easier to do is to identify a victim, right? And when we identify a victim, going all the way back to 1983 or even prior to that, we'll be able to identify a victim, a person who is aggrieved by a certain incident. Now, providing reparation for that person and taking certain initiatives to ensure that events such as that will not recur and the community reconcile, those are easy steps to take.
Those are the key steps. Of course, that's where we should be focusing on as a collective society as well.
Absolutely.
Well, we have come to time in this segment. We have quite a bit more to discuss, specifically on the legislative aspects as well of the bill that's going to be tabled, and of course its future and its effectiveness in the current context. But before we speak on any of that, let's go in for a very short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us.
Hi, my name is Gunawansa and I'm an analyst. My question is regarding legislature. How does the CUTR bill intend to address lapses in existing legislature surrounding transitional justice?
Welcome back. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We are in discussion with President's Counsel Dr. Asanga Gunawansa, and we were just talking about the Interim Secretariat for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and how exactly the process has been leading up to the formation of an eventual commission and, of course, the drafting of a bill. We just left off on, I believe, a very important aspect of the people's choice and the people's voices in the entire discussion, the relevant stakeholders and how they have reacted to the continuation of this venture, which of course is extremely necessary despite being completely delayed as of yet. Could you please, Doctor, explain to us now? We know that the bill is going to be drafted. We know that the bill is drafted, even though you consider it a concept paper. It's already in the process of becoming actual law. So could you please explain to us exactly how the bill approaches the reconciliation aspects, the truth and unity aspects of this entire humanitarian crisis that we underwent?
Sure. So first thing is to understand the structure of the commission itself, right, and how the commissioners are appointed, because the lawmakers already, the cabinet at least, has taken a decision that it has to be an independent commission appointed, by passing a law as an act of parliament. So how do we appoint an independent commission? So the current draft of the law provides that there will be between 7 to 21 commissioners, so minimum of 7, maximum of 21, depending on the number of complaints, and so on that they will have to look into, will be appointed by His Excellency the President on the recommendation of the Constitutional Council. So as you know, Constitutional Council is one of the independent bodies established by our Constitution in order to ensure that when persons are appointed to high posts in Sri Lanka, amongst other things, that the appointments are independent, in nature. So that is why only with the recommendation of the Constitutional Council the President can appoint. Now, once the commissioners are appointed, sections 12 and 13 of the current draft give them wide powers with regard to their mandate and the objective and how to implement it. And I will read a particular section, to which explains the mandate. So it goes like this: say the commission has the power to investigate, inquire, and make recommendations in respect of complaints, allegations, and reports relating to loss of life or other damage, or any harm caused to persons or property, including alleged violation of human rights anywhere in Sri Lanka that were caused in the course of or reasonably connected to or consequent to the conflict which took place in the north and the eastern provinces of Sri Lanka during the period 1983 to 2009 or its aftermath. So it's very wide in that sense, but it concentrates on the conflict that we had in relation to north and the east, but victims could be anywhere in Sri Lanka. Now, when you read this, it's very clear. The complainant who could come before this commission could be anyone in Sri Lanka who has been affected. So I foresee the possibility of, a father, mother, sister, or a relative, right, of a, perhaps a young person who, has gone missing in the northern province or eastern province, coming and lodging a complaint. Similarly, I see a mother or father or sister or brother of a person in the south right, who have been a victim of a, like the central bank bomb or something like that, coming and lodging a complaint, or somebody coming in and complaint saying that, for example, my son, joined the armed forces, he was a soldier in this particular camp, he has surrendered, and we don't know what happened to him. So all these issues need to be looked at. So this law has not been drafted in order to do favors to certain quarters or victimize certain quarters. It's a very balanced law which tries to look at a conflict that has occurred in Sri Lanka from a national perspective in order to find a national solution to the problem. Right? Then what is also important is, in addition to the Commission, there are two other bodies. So one such body is, there is provision in the draft bill based on its current reading to appoint an advisory body consisting of not only local but international experts on the subject of transitional justice. And then the Commission is required to submit interim reports biannually as well as a final report after his work is over to the President. And His Excellency the President is then required to table it in Parliament for Parliament's consideration, and Parliament can pass appropriate resolutions based on that. But these reports that are being submitted to the President and through the President to Parliament has to be vetted by the independent body. So there is provision to say that the independent body's advice should be taken in drafting.
So there's checks and balances.
So that is to create certain checks and balances and some guidance as to how to deal with it. Then the other important factor is that there is also provision in the draft law to appoint a monitoring committee. Now, why do we need a monitoring committee? The purpose of the monitoring committee is to make sure that when the Commission makes recommendations, and those recommendations go to the President and thereafter through the President to Parliament, and the recommendations may say, for example, different government entities should take certain initiatives. Maybe one recommendation may be directed towards the Education Ministry. I'm just giving an example. One may be towards the Justice Ministry, one may be towards the Attorney General, and so on. So the monitoring committee will then monitor whether these recommendations are being implemented. So there are checks and balances there. In addition to that, once all the reports need to be published, and when they go to Parliament, of course, Parliament is represented by different political parties who have been, members of different political parties who have been elected by our people, and they can also question about the implementation. So that is the best way to create checks and balances. So that's how the current working of the Act, is done or drafted, and the Commission can make, especially with regard to non-recurrence, there are wide variety of recommendations that they can make.
Right. So despite there being quite a significant amount of authority being handed to a commissioner, there are adequate checks and balances. I was actually going to ask you, Doctor, about what to do when it comes to the corruption aspects. We have a lot of issues because this is a bill for the people, and there has to be some form of accountability in order to ensure that the commission is actually being carried out with its intended will and not with any manipulation. But I believe, as our listeners might have just understood by the explanation, there are multiple checks and balances, and there's multiple monitoring authorities as well in order to ensure transparency when it comes to the pursuit of reconciliation and truth. I would like to ask you, Doctor, a question of curiosity now. Is this bill and is this commission more retrospective than prospective, or do we see that it can, of course, lean towards future-leaning aspects? Of course, we're focusing on a conflict that happened years ago, but that does not mean that the commission cannot work in the future towards it. But is there any issues with specifics when it comes to that nature?
So I see the commission actually playing a dual role in that context, and see, if you really look at the objective behind it, even today when we speak to our people, there are people with grievances, resulting from the conflict that we had, and they feel that, our concerns have not been addressed. Now, although in the past various commissions of inquiries have been appointed and people have gone and told their truth, shed their tears, some of them say that we have not yet found a solution. And there are some people who, for various reasons, may not have come forward and told their truth. So one of the main pillars of transitional justice is to provide a platform for people to record the truth. And as a country, we should know what really happened, right? And knowing that, it's important to ensure that it will not be repeated in future. So having said that, if you only record, it's like archiving, something that has happened, that is not enough. So when it concerns non-recurrence, there are very futuristic, forward-thinking policy recommendations that the Commission will have to make. Now, if you take Sri Lanka, for example, when you go to various regions, we still have sometimes, I'm subject to correction, I'm not a statistician in this area, but I've been told there are Muslim schools and Tamil schools and Sinhalese schools. And then even in our universities, when you go to, now we went to the Northern University, we went to a couple of Eastern universities, in certain faculties, right, almost entirely, if not at least 90% of the student intake is from a particular ethnic group. I think going forward we need to solve that, because the communal harmony, for example, can start with integration between different groups of or youth coming from different communities in our country. And if that happens, going forward, because they are the future leaders and future decision makers. So we have to facilitate that, and unfortunately that had not happened for certain reasons. And then also we realized, now one other example is when we especially went to the Eastern Province, there are issues, some of the issues are between, say for example, the Muslim community and the Tamil community. And some of those root causes are mainly misunderstandings, and perhaps now in one particular division we saw that there are two divisional secretaries functioning, and one divisional secretariat is headed by a Muslim gentleman, the other divisional secretariat is headed by a Tamil gentleman. So the two communities feel that, okay, why do we have two? And then some people say there should be one. And so how do you actually, take, so the policymakers need to, very, very carefully consider. Then there are certain current problems, again, the Commission might have to take into consideration. So one of the problems seem to be that in the North and the Eastern Province, for example, let's say that, a group of youth or group of individuals, irrespective of their age, are stopped, by the armed forces or the police. And then there is a communication gap. Perhaps the people who stop do the stopping may not be able to converse in Tamil. And the people who are stopped are not able to, fluently converse in English or Sinhalese. So then there is a bit of a miscommunication. So we need to address that, and one way of doing that would be, also to provide facilities for, people in the state administration to be conversant in, all three languages. So these are steps. I mean, you can't do it in a year or 2 years, or So we might have to take certain plans in place now, and perhaps in 3 to 5 years or maybe 10 years from now, we will see the actual results. So those are the forward-thinking policies that we might have to implement, and those recommendations will have to come through this Commission, having done a detailed study of the complaints and problems that will be placed before them.
Right. Well, there is quite a bit that has to be done, but quite a bit that has been unaddressed in the past as well, and hopefully the Commission can actually move towards addressing these grievances. Specifically when you mentioned the Divisional Secretariat issue, it's quite a can of worms. No one actually knows exactly how to solve such an issue, especially when it comes to the familiarity of ethnicity as well. There is quite a lot of issues there. Hopefully the Commission can actually find some middle ground, not just in that aspect, but in other aspects as well. Unfortunately, we have come to time in this segment as well. We have a bit more to discuss, specifically when it comes to the future of the establishment of the Commission, and also what the pushback has been like from lawmakers. Before we speak about any of that, let's go in for a short commercial break. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. Be right back.
My name is and I'm a student. My question is on the future of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What can we do as a society to aid the efforts of the Commission?
Welcome back. You're watching Law, Land and Liberty. We are in our final segment now in discussion with President's Counsel Dr. Asanga Gunawansa, and we were just speaking about a very packed discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have much time left to speak about the further specifics. While we did discuss, of course, there's things to consider on an international scale as well. But before we go for any of those discussions, I think it's important to ask now, you mentioned it was a concept paper, Doctor, but it is being, it's on its way to becoming actual legislature. Could you explain to us now, with the lawmaker aspect, how exactly has the pushback and how exactly has the correspondence been with Parliament? Has it been all positive? Have there been forceful changes that need to be made? How's the dialogue like over there?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, because how the Parliament would eventually respond, I would not know, and that would we will find out when the draft law is further refined. Why I call it a concept paper, there is still room for refining it, right? So once it is further refined and when it is tabled before Parliament for first reading, second reading and so on, we can see how the Parliament would react to it. But what I can say is that the lawmakers to whom we have spoken to, for example, we have now the two champions or three champions behind this process at the moment, I would say, is His Excellency the President, the Honourable Foreign Minister and the Honourable Minister of Justice. They are the three key politicians from the government with whom the Interim Secretariat has had the opportunity of interacting with regard to this particular subject matter. And they seem to be very supportive and very keen to, make sure that even though some people say that it's very late, at least now to bring this law in place in order to make sure that we find a lasting solution to the problem that we have faced. Now, when we engage with stakeholders, we also engage with other politicians in the country. We consulted the opposition leader, Mr. Honourable Sajid Premadasa. We consulted Mr. Sumandiran. We consulted Mr. Ananda Sangari. We consulted Mr. Rauf Hakim. We also consulted Mrs. Harini Amarasuriya. So several people have been spoken to. Now, they may have conceptual differences, or different ideas as to what the law would eventually should look like. And we have invited all of them to study the draft law and give their comments to see whether we could further refine it. And that undertaking they have given. Some of them had issues about whether it's the right time to introduce, and so on. So my response to that has been that, if you can assist the Interim Secretariat to develop a good law, irrespective of, whether the current government continues or whether there's a, new government, it doesn't matter. Whoever is in power can continue and implement the law, because the Commission itself will be independent. So Commission will not have a political role to play. It will be an independent body created by an Act of Parliament, which is empowered by that Act. So the Commission can act within that jurisdiction. So it really doesn't matter who is, ruling the country at the moment. If they are willing to implement the recommendations of the Commission, the system could work. Now, one day if somebody decides, no, we are not going to implement it, or we are not going to, or we are going to amend the law, or we are going to discontinue with it, then those persons concerned will be eventually answerable to the voters, and that is not a matter on which, I could make a statement. But what I can say is that from the perspective of the Interim Secretariat, we are trying to lay the foundation work, which is what we have been mandated to do, and also refine the law as much as possible to make sure that it could work effectively. So rest is up to the lawmakers.
Right, so it's what has to be done has been done, and it will be moved forward. Hopefully only good results will follow. Doctor, we are closing in on our time limit, unfortunately, but I'd like to ask you specifically when it comes to the transparency aspect of this entire process as well. I believe the media plays a very important role when it comes to the conveyance of information to the general public, because this is a bill that needs to be backed by the people before it's actually being brought into actual law. It has everything to do with the people, so it's quite important to see how knowledgeable and how informed the public is on on the commission. Could you explain to us, has it been good reception? Has there been any sort of issues when it comes to the permeating of the information here? How has it been?
I would say the limited reception that we have got so far is pretty good. But having said that, there's more that the media can do, for the reason that, I mean, whether it's social media, print media, TV, and other types of visual media, that's where a message can be carried forward to the general public. So although the law has been gazetted so that people have access to it, I think it's important for programs like this, perhaps in all three languages, to discuss about this law and invite people with diverse views to come and express their views. But eventually we should try to build some consensus, because whether you are in the media, whether you are in a political party or in a non-governmental organization, other civil society organizations or individuals, as I said earlier, we all agree on two things. Reconciliation is important and non-recurrence is important. So that is common ground, very solid common ground. And then the remaining problem is, how do we deal with the past? So that is where we need to build some consensus. And I don't think it's a difficult task, provided that we all genuinely work towards it. So my plea to the media is, I have seen sometimes, I mean, this is a free country, people have the freedom to, say what they have to say, but certain statements are being recorded and then that is being taken to the general public. And anybody reading it, could say that, okay, this is a particular individual's perspective on this. But since this is a very important and crucial subject for our nation, and the media could also cross-check with the people who are actually involved in promoting and drafting this law, to get what the other perspective is, so that the reader can then come to a very balanced conclusion, having considered both opinions.
Right. It shouldn't be a skewed viewpoint at all. There needs to be much more transparency when it comes to this commission, especially considering social media as well, because that's where we see most of our information being permeated these days. Finally, Doctor, unfortunately, this is going to be, I think, our final question. As a people, as a collective society, how should we be responding and how should we be actively engaging with the commission? Should we be doing anything in order to participate in stakeholder discussions? Is there something as an individual that we can do in order to better help build the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Is there anything that as a person we can do?
Yes, I think so, because even now, as I said, this is why I call it still a concept paper. The draft law is now available, and anybody who is interested in the subject matter could read it and provide their feedback to the Interim Secretariat, and we will take note of that. But when the commission is established, once you read the draft bill, you will see, I earlier read out the mandate of the commission. If anybody has any information to bring before the commission which would assist the work and aid the work of the commission, then they are free to do that. And actual participation is required. Because if you have a certain grievance, or certain information with regard to a suffering of another person, and you keep that information within you, and you don't bring it to a commission that is being established to solve the problem, then you will not find a solution, right? And if you can speak to a lot of people who might not be able to give you a solution, but that's not the way to go about it. And within the law, there is provision to ensure safety and security and confidentiality of people who might want to even remain anonymous and bring that information to the commission. So therefore, that aspect is being looked after. And what we need is the people to actually come forward and effectively participate.
Exactly. When there is a solution that's trying to be provided by a commission, we should of course reach out and take it, especially considering the impact that the conflict has had. I'm sure everyone is a part of a circle that has impacted individuals, so it's going to be essential that we actually communicate this, the establishment of the commission, and actually use the commission in order to better understand and reconcile with our entities, our stakeholders. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have to discuss this very vast topic. Thank you very much, Doctor. I believe it was a very important discussion with a lot of wide-ranging factors, despite being such a short time period. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. Well, despite the restorative impact that such a commission can have on the human landscape in our country, it's up to us individually to push for more transparency and accountability in the aspects of upholding unity, truth, and most importantly, reconciliation. We leave you tonight with the words of Justice Murray Sinclair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. The road we travel is equal in importance to the destination we seek. There are no shortcuts. When it comes to truth and reconciliation, we are forced to go the distance. That is all we have for you tonight on Law, Land and Liberty. If you had missed any of today's programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/OtherDerana English. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.